This is Ethos lecture and podcast number 7, Telos versus Ethos. When do the ends justify the means? With me, Ethos Ananda. This is based on my book Ethos, Complete Happiness and Excellence by Way of Virtue and Reason by Alexander Campanella. So this is free for just a few more days, then $5.99. Check out the links below. Quick introduction, and then I'll get right to the good stuff. What is telos? Telos is the Greek word for end, goal, or purpose. This is the root word for teleology. Telos was also essential in the birth of epistemology. Epistemology means how we know what we know. This is just from Wikipedia. All right, so I'm going to start with a summary. I'm going to just do the end first. And if you want to know why this is how it is, you can keep listening until the end of it. Also, I don't think I'm going to be doing many more of these lecture podcast series. I think my time is best spent elsewhere concerning ethos. I want to publish a second book on ethos and work more on like drawing illustrations for ethos. I think that's maybe better. I'm going to start doing a Mythos series, starting with the Ethos of Anakin Skywalker. That'll be much more fun for people. Okay, number 1. So if we live according to the ethos, strictly speaking, there are no ends. So there's no end. We don't need to worry about justifying means for ends because there are no ends. Our goal is character. It's not a specific thing or event. It's just character. Even if our goal is to have a better friendship, that's still existing across a long time span. And so the idea of justifying any act, any singular immoral act, is just silly. It doesn't really come into play when you think in terms of decades of time at one time. So, if you're talking to someone and they say, well, I don't know, does the end justify the means? It doesn't matter. It does matter, but that's not the right way to think about it. Number 2, there are some maxims that we can use to help determine and traverse a value hierarchy. So when we talk about ends justifying the means, we're saying which item is higher on a value hierarchy. And when we know what's higher, then we act accordingly. So here are some simple maxims, and you can use these for ethics and aesthetics as well. These are actually more commonly known in aesthetics, like how to make art and craftsmanship, but it's true in the ethical world also. One is, what is simple is better than what is complicated. Maxim 2, what is eternal is greater than what is temporary. Maxim 3, what is complete is greater than that which is lacking. All right, point number 3, we should aim towards doing the right things for the right reasons at the right times, etc. So since we're always aiming this way, we don't ever need to stop to justify anything, because that's not actually how we're going to live our lives. According to the ethos, we're going to always do the best thing we can in a positive way and not thinking about justifying something negative. That's not our natural way of doing things, according to the ethos. We want to be simply excellent and fine and I don't want to say famous, but we want to think like we are famous and that people are watching us and we have responsibility and a big name to live up to. That's magnanimity, at least, the ultimate virtue of character. Point number 4, the most excellent action may sometimes be a horrible means to an excellent end or an excellent means to a horrible end. And this is because every scenario and circumstance can change greatly. This is why ethics is really complicated and it's not like a hard science that humans have figured out. We've never figured it out, but Aristotle's system is the closest I have found to a scientific system on ethics, and that's why I published a book, and that's why I'm doing these lecture series. And so, what's the answer here? The answer is aiming towards the fine, living according to reason. And by reason, I mean our capability for reason, not like a reason for doing something. Because ethics is not a list of rules on paper. You may think it is when you hear the word ethics, but that's wrong. And could be a conspiracy why, I'm not sure, but that's not ethics. So if you're fine with my summary, then you can continue your life, or if you want to learn more, you can keep on listening. Here's my plan of action for the rest of this lecture and podcast. Number one, where and what is telos within the ethos? Number two, how do we apply telos to ethos? Number three, what is more important, telos or ethos? Number four, I'm going to establish and show the hierarchy of value in the ethos. And then the last point is how do we move around this value hierarchy? How do we determine what is more or less valuable, meaningful, etc.? So in the very first chapter, about verse 7, we see that telos is actually the grounding for the entire text of the ethos. So the more, and this is, I think, the brilliance of Aristotle, because you can apply this same thinking to anything else, not just ethics, to the ideal chair, the ideal glass of juice. The more you see the function of it, the purpose, the telos, why it's there, the more we can see the ideal manifestation of that. What is the most excellent person? We know from being, well, what is a person? Why does a person exist? When you can really answer that question, then you know the ideal, the golden standard towards which you can aim. So telos is our function, and ethos is the tool we use to fulfill that function, as well as the manifestation of how successful or how much of a failure we are in fulfilling our function. For example, I can say, well, I'm reading the ethos and I'm really trying to improve my ethos. Today my ethos is great. To the degree that we fulfill our purpose as humans is the degree to which we say we are happy or excellent. Now, most practically, telos is really a means to an end. We seek our own function so that we can fulfill it, meaning action is the end of philosophy. So once you find out your telos as a human or as a teacher, as a janitor, whatever, whatever telos you're looking for, as soon as you find it, you're done. That's the end of telos, is just finding it and holding on to it or coming back to it. That's it. But ethos is much more dynamic and practical and immediate. You can always work on your ethos. Now, the ultimate completion of telos and ethos is Ananda, spiritual bliss. So when we know our function and when we fulfill our function excellently and completely, that is bliss. That is supreme bliss. And I will eventually write a book on that also. And I'll try to tie in together this Western path of ethos from Aristotle and the Eastern path. It's true in the West also, but the East has really done a much better job of spiritual mysticism, wisdom traditions, etc. And all of that culminates in Ananda, which is bliss. When you fully taste this eternal spiritual bliss, it gives you a power over everything else in the material world. But to hold on to that Ananda, I think ethos is really essential. And that's why I'm Ethos Ananda, because I want to combine both of these as much as I can. What is more important, telos or ethos? If we only have telos, we are just like cogs in a machine. And if we only have ethos, we are characters in the story, but we don't know the story. Maybe kind of like Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. Here's some other examples. Telos without ethos is like prudence without wisdom or any of the other virtues. It's like having just prudence but none of the other virtues. Or it's like having generosity but no money. So it's great that you're a generous person, but if you don't have any goods to be generous with, it doesn't actually count for much at all. And ethos without telos is like the wise man who can't tie his shoelaces, or the beautiful actress typecast for her looks alone. There's something missing there as well. Which one's more important? Well, hard to say, but it's easy to say we need both telos and ethos for a complete life, complete happiness. Once we find our fundamental telos, I've mentioned this before, just go back to it when we like. It should stay in the background of our consciousness. But ethos is dynamic and immediate. It's a state of character, so it's stable across time, but it 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 has to be present in our consciousness, at least to some degree, on a daily basis. Otherwise, we will not improve. This is what the self-help movement is trying to do, is to bring our consciousness back towards ethos. And the ethos is the foundation for this whole self-help thing. Aristotle started this thousands of years ago. So I'm not actually doing this myself. I'm just like the messenger for Aristotle here. Now I'm going to summarize this even more simply using just the ethos. Telos is chapters 1, 2, 7, and 10 of the ethos, and ethos is all the other chapters in the ethos. So the first two chapters and the last chapter, these are like the foundation, and the last chapter is kind of like the future and the superfluous aspects of ethos. And then chapter 7 is about like what's voluntary, what's involuntary. Then that's based on the function of things. So you need these telos chapters to make sense of all the other chapters, but in your daily life to actually live happily and improve your life, you need all the other chapters. You need chapter 4, virtue of character, chapter 5, friendship and justice and virtues of thought. Those are what you need on a daily basis. All right, let's move on to value hierarchies. So you can start to see a value hierarchy emerge early on in Ethos 1:12. Guess you'll have to get the book to read the verse. So in general, it's easy to see how some aspects of ourselves are more or less important than others. We can easily see that virtue of character is better than virtue of thought, and so on. It's our natural inclination to see that, to assume that if we sacrifice a lower order item for a higher order item, that's just. That's what we mean when we might say the end justifies the means. Although it's actually better, as I just said it, it's more like, because sometimes that's not true, but it's always true if you say we sacrifice a lower order item for a higher order item in a value hierarchy. Then we're good. So here's some examples. Being clever is not as valuable as being brave. Here, valuable means fulfilling our telos and manifesting ideal ethos. That is, complete happiness, complete excellence. If you're clever, you can get a lot of stuff done, but if you're just clever and nothing else, you've got nothing. You can easily be taken down by by time, by so many external factors. But if you're brave, no matter what happens, you'll find a way to deal with it and you'll handle it well, and people will look up to you and you'll have better friends. It's just better to be brave. Um, and also, as I said before, character is better than thought. Character is present with us all the time. It's stable across time. It's like it's like the operating system on your computer. You may, you need to update it once in a while, but for the most part, it just keeps going. Um, Virtue of thought is like using a certain program and then closing it. It's exercised at certain times only. Exception being prudence and wisdom, the major virtues of thought. The minor ones like deliberation, decision, these are, we just kind of exercise them and then forget about them. All right, so now I'm going to get into the maxims I mentioned earlier. What is eternal or durable is superior to what is temporary or weak. So these sorts of value judgments are true in aesthetics and ethics. And I'll just say two more of these maxims. And this is just an example. This is not from the ethos. This is just things I've over the years, which seem to be true in almost every circumstance. But once again, this is not a hard science, so we can't expect it to be like a hard science. If it's true 90% of the time, we need to accept that as true and move on. And this is why character is better than thought, because character is more durable and eternal, whereas thought is more temporary and subject to change. Maxim 2, what is more complete is better than that which is lacking. Maxim 3, what is simpler is better than that which is complicated, more complicated. That's Occam's razor. So let's try to apply these maxims. All right, so here's a common example. I actually just Googled ends justify the means to find like a good example, and here's a good one. Lying on a CV to get a job. So the increase in income may justify this small lie, but lying is still wrong. So where do we draw the line? So here's how I use the three maxims in this situation, but there are many more maxims like this we can use, and there's many different dimensions through which we can apply these maxims. So number one, it seems more eternally valid to say that it's just better to tell the truth. And yeah, maybe you have to wait for a better job, or it might be tough in the short term, but across the longest time span possible, we just want to tell the truth. And knowing that we're just being truthful, no matter what, that's really strong ethos, which will give us many other benefits that are hard to even measure. And of course, even after lying to get a job, you still can lose the job later, and at least you're going to die anyway. So everything temporary or material in this world, we have to give up eventually. So is it worth sacrificing something on the moral dimension, meaning lying, to get something on the material dimension? No, that's not, that seems quite stupid. So I didn't think about that until now. So actually, that's another maxim. I mean, it's true for this, it comes from the first maxim, but we can think about it like this. Anything, any benefit we may get from the material world cannot be justified by an immoral act in the moral realm, because the moral realm is superior to the material realm. It's more eternal. The material world can change, and it doesn't have any value in itself. This world only matters because we are meaningful beings within it, because we are self-aware and And what's true now in the moral world is true 10,000 years from now as well. It will still be of value to be honest and brave in the future. Trust me. We may forget it at the moment. We may be in a meaning crisis where we think, oh, actually, there is no objective truth and I can lie if I want to. Da 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 da. But that's simply not the truth. There's a real truth here, and you obey it for your fortune or you go against it at your peril. All right, here's using the second maxim. It's more complete for our lives if we have a good job with a small sacrifice of a small lie. If we lied and stayed unemployed, our lives would be lacking. So, from the sense of completeness, that meaning having, all of your friendships in order and having more money to be more generous, more magnificent, maybe it is a good idea to say a small lie to get so many good benefits. And maxim three, what is simplest? I like this one. So it's really simple to just say, all right, I'm going to tell the truth all the time. And it's also simple to say, I'm just going to do what is most beneficial all the time for myself and others. So if there's much benefit by doing a small thing wrong, why not? But that goes against the simplicity of just telling the truth all the time. So to continue using these maxims, this will get very tiring. And we'll need to have many more maxims than just these three, it seems. Here's the biblical perspective. This, once again, this is just basic Google search on this. There is no justifying immoral behavior, no matter the motivation for it or the outcome of it. So, this is why the Bible has been so successful for so many thousands of years, because it's so simple and it works. It may be difficult to accept this and put it into practice, but this does work. That's why it's survived. However, regardless of my own feelings of that, what I'm doing now is a purely secular course based on Aristotle. So if this is true or not, it doesn't matter. We have to come to the truth by our own logic, science, wisdom, evidence, etc. The initial attitude we get from the ethos of Aristotle is quite simple. Do the right thing for the right reason at the right time, aim for the golden mean. That's it. So, how to determine what is the most right or fine way to act? Well, this takes years of study and practice, which I've already been doing. And, well, that's why I wrote a book on it and trying to share this with others. So first, how exactly are we lying on this CV? Because there are small lies and big lies. So a small lie would be like if you change the date on one thing, and a big lie would be like you write down a whole lot of job experience that just never happened. So let's take the smallest lie possible, compare it with the greatest benefit possible, and let's see if that's acceptable. The smallest lie. Everything is accurate and honest on the CV, except one of the dates was changed by a small amount. Let's say you just add one extra month of work experience. But there's a huge benefit. After getting this job, you can feed the hungry, shelter the homeless, and you get paid big bucks. And let's say you will actually do all these things. So, if by not changing just one little detail on a CV, we don't get a job, we don't get the job, we can't help all these people we were going to help, and help ourselves, this just isn't just. It's not a fair reciprocation. Remember, justice is greater than virtue of character, because justice is virtue for ourselves and others. What would the magnificent man do? Well, he'd be eager to make this small lie, because he'd always be thinking of how much he can benefit others. And it's also not even a lie. It's just not. As the job experience really did happen on the CV and you just changed the date, it's actually more like an exaggeration than a lie. So this is how the magnificent man will think about this. Because he's so eager to benefit others, he won't even think about it as a lie. It'll be very quick to act here, I think. Assuming this crazy scenario, which isn't realistic, of course. The wise man would not find it in good taste to say even a small lie to make great benefit. The internal shame and regret would be more disturbing than the external benefits that would ensue. Why? Because the wise man is always or typically more anchored to the eternal world than the temporary world. Even the magnanimous man can get caught up in the temporary world, but to be truly wise means you're dealing with the eternal dimension. The moral dimension is eternal, but the social and cultural and political dimensions are not eternal. The ultimate man, the most magnanimous, what would he say? Well, he would either definitely say the small lie to give him the chance to benefit others and show his greatness is good, or what I would say is he definitely wouldn't bother applying for such a job where you just change 1 month and that'll make or break an application. That's either way too much competition or an employer who makes a decision like that is just unreasonable and lacking in character. And the magnanimous man should not be associating with such people. All right, so since this has most to do with justice, here's a verse on justice from Ethos 8:8. Quote, justice is the only virtue that seems to be another person's good, because it is related to another, for it does what benefits another, either the ruler or the fellow member of the community, unquote. We are essentially comparing the injustice of the lie towards the employer versus the justice towards ourself and society when we get the job. And here's Ethos 8:11, quote, in any action where too much and too little are possible, the fair amount is also possible. Since the equal and fair is intermediate, the just is some sort of intermediate condition, unquote. So this action actually does not seem to be too much or too little. On the job application, there's normally a little checkbox where you promise that everything we've written is the truth. So either you can or you cannot make that promise within just the application itself. But then going back to what I just said before, there's the societal implications where there's lying maybe too much on the CV and lying, and there's no way to lie too little. Because, all right, so truthfulness, the social virtue of character in chapter 4, does have a golden mean. But truthfulness in terms of logos, in terms of the truth, is absolute and on the divine, eternal dimension. And in that sense, you cannot have too much or too little logos. You just have logos or you don't have it. And you just want to get more of it. So the truth is the truth. What would I do in this situation? I would just weigh out in my hands two different things. On one hand, you have the guilt and shame for lying, and there's also within this a small betrayal of trust towards my future employer. I'd assume that I'd be truthful to my employer, they'd be truthful to me. On the other hand, is all the benefits to myself and others for getting the job. So, whichever hand weighs more, that hand wins, and I'll decide accordingly. um, once again, in this fake, made up situation. Right now, I have 3 jobs, and they're very easy to get, and I can get more jobs. I don't need to lie. Pure ethos. This is the way. There are no ends to justify, there are only means. The human himself is an end. And this is Kantian. Uh, this is why the categorical imperative works, is because humans are ends in themselves. And we are our ethos, our character is an end in itself. So we have to do our best never to do injustice to ourselves. Once again, that's true on the eternal dimension, and it would seem that lying to ourselves is more harmful eternally than big money, big bucks, big job, whatever. We are just trying to fulfill our function as humans, which means being human means activity of the soul in accord with reason, aiming for the fine at the right time with the right people, right reasons, etc. Character is not really an end, although to the degree that we are persons and ends in ourselves, it is to that degree, but it's not any event. Ethos and our character, it's an amalgamation of habits and behaviors repeated across so many years, a long time. That will be my final lecture for a long time. Anyway, I hope you'll get my book on ethos, or at least my second book when it comes out. Check it out. Goodbye.